Welcome to Filmera, a place where you can find different genre of movie reviews. Today, let's review a supernatural horror film released in 2020, Fantasy Island. The film is about 5 people who have won a contest that takes them to Fantasy Island, where their fantasies will apparently be fulfilled. They are Gwen Olsen, a businesswoman, Patrick Sullivan, a former police officer, stepbrothers J, D, and Brax Weaver, and Melanie Cole, a girl who was bullied during childhood. On the island, they meet the Guardian, Mr. Rourke, who cautions them that they must see their fantasies at their conclusions. That night, JD and Brax are taken into their fantasy of becoming rich, which leads them to a rave at a mansion. The next morning, the remaining guests are taken to their fantasies, Patrick's to enlist in a war in honor of his late father, Melanie's to get revenge on her childhood bully Sloan, and Gwen's to accept her ex-boyfriend Alan's marriage proposal that she turned down years ago. Melanie later learns that her bully Sloan was kidnapped and brought to Fantasy Island against her will. She saves her from a masked surgeon and they both run away. Meanwhile, Patrick is captured by a group of soldiers and taken to their commander, Lieutenant Sullivan, which turns out to be his father. As night falls, the surgeon appears suddenly and attacks Melanie and Sloan again before Damon, a private investigator, helps them. After that, Damon reveals that Rourke offered him to see his dead daughter again, but his fantasy turned into a nightmare that trapped him on the island. He also explains that the fantasies are created by a spring water under a glowing rock in a cave. They decides to go into the cave to collect some spring water and heads to the resort for help. Gwen awakens the next morning to discover that she has a daughter with Alan and becomes dissatisfied. She encounters Rourke and he explains that the fantasies must be fulfilled so that his own fantasy of being with his deceased wife can continue. Gwen convinces him to give her the fantasy she really wanted instead, which is to save a neighbor who died in a fire. The Fantasy Island begins to turn their fantasies into living nightmares as the stepbrothers are taken hostage by a drug cartel associated with the mansion's owner. Gwen is taken to the night where she accidentally started a fire that killed her neighbor Nick Taylor. She finds out that the other guests were also there, except Melanie, and attempts to save Nick but fails and is rescued by Rourke's assistant, Julia. Meanwhile, Patrick's father tries to escape with Patrick to go home safely, but Patrick manages to convince him otherwise. So they proceed with the mission to save the hostages, which turns out to be JD and Brax, the stepbrothers. The soldiers kill the cartel, rescue JD and Brax, but the cartel reanimates as a group of zombies who kill JD and the soldiers. Patrick's father sacrifices himself to let Patrick and Brax escape. Melanie and Sloan are attacked by the zombified surgeon until Damon pushes him over a cliff with him, saving them at the cost of his own life. The remaining guests gather at the resort, but are cornered by Rourke, who reveals that they are in a fantasy in which they are all killed. Realizing that everyone was actually involved in Nick's death, including Melanie, as she told that Nick asked her out that night and she turned him down, which is the reason why he was in the apartment. So they assume it is Julia's fantasy as they believe that Julia was Nick's mother. After that, they run to the dock to be rescued by a plane sent by Damon's associates, but unfortunately it is shot down. They decide to run to the cave to destroy the glowing rock with a grenade Patrick is carrying. Suddenly, Melanie stabs Patrick and takes Sloan as hostage, revealing that it is actually her true fantasy. She wants to seek revenge on them for Nick's death, with whom she had a date. Julia is revealed to be Rourke's wife, brought back to life by the power of the island. As Julia begins to die because of a terminal disease, she convinces Rourke to let go of her and help the guests escape the island before disappearing. In the midst of the chaos, Sloan remembers the spring water she collected before and wishes Melanie to be forever with Nick. As a result, a zombified Nick appears and drags Melanie into the water with him. However, before drowning, Melanie detonates the grenade, but Patrick sacrifices himself and falls on the grenade to protect the others. At the end of the movie, Gwen, Sloan, and Brax wake up at the resort, where Rourke finally agrees to let them go. As the guests board a plane to leave the Fantasy Island, Brax wishes for JD to come back to life, but Rourke explains that Brax must stay on the island for his fantasy to come true. After Gwen, Sloan, and a resurrected JD depart, Rourke asks Brax to become his new assistant. Remembering a nickname JD gave him, Brax chooses to rename himself Tattoo. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss a single video.